People always ask me how our family fell apart. I usually tell them it started the day my youngest daughter disappeared. But the truth is, it started long before that. I just didn't realize it. Looking back now, the warning signs had been there all along. We just called them bad days. If I had understood what they really meant, my daughters might still be alive today. My name is David Carter. For most of my life, I believed I had everything a man could ask for. A loving wife, 3 beautiful children, a quiet farmhouse outside Kalispell, Montana. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Every morning, Emma would race outside before breakfast just to feed the horses. Lily would follow behind, pretending the chickens were her own little army. My oldest son, Ethan, he rarely smiled, but whenever his sisters laughed, he usually wasn't far behind. Watching them together made every sacrifice worth it. Money had been tight since we moved from Seattle. Losing my construction business nearly broke me, but every evening we'd eat dinner together. No phones, no television, just family. Looking back, those dinners became the memories I replay the most. Lily was only 8. She had a habit of leaving tiny paper drawings all over the house. Every drawing showed the same thing. Birds, dozens of them, flying over trees, perched on rooftops, even sitting on people's shoulders. Whenever I asked why she always drew birds, she'd smile and say, "They're always watching." I thought it was just a child's imagination. I wish it had been. Everything changed on a cold October morning. Sarah was making breakfast. Emma was getting ready for school. Ethan was still upstairs. "Lily," my wife called her name once, then twice. No answer. Her bedroom door was slightly open. The bed was empty. The window was locked from the inside. Her shoes were still beside the bed. Her favorite stuffed rabbit lay on the pillow. Nothing looked disturbed. It was almost as if she'd simply disappeared. At first, we searched the property ourselves. The barn, the cornfield, the creek behind the house. Then we called the police. Within hours, volunteers from neighboring towns filled the woods. Helicopters searched from above. Tracking dogs circled our land again and again. They lost her scent less than 50 yards from the back porch. It simply stopped, like she'd vanished into thin air. 3 days later, a hunter discovered something hanging from the branch of a pine tree nearly a mile away. It was Lily's backpack. Inside were her flashlight, a small notebook, and one object none of us had ever seen before, a tiny wooden bird. Hand-carved, smooth, old, no fingerprints, no initials, nothing. Detectives assumed it belonged to Lily. Sarah immediately shook her head. "I've never seen that before." Neither had I. That evening, the sheriff returned. He didn't have to say a word. One look at his face, and our world ended. Sarah collapsed before he reached the porch. Emma screamed. I couldn't move. For several minutes, nobody spoke. There are moments in life your mind refuses to accept. That was one of them. The funeral was attended by nearly the entire county. Flowers covered the church entrance. People cried. Neighbors brought food we never touched. Everyone promised we'd find whoever did this. I wanted to believe them, but when everyone finally went home, the silence inside our farmhouse was unbearable. Lily's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it. Her crayons were still on the floor. Her favorite blanket was folded at the end of the bed. Sarah refused to let anyone clean the room. Every night, she sat on Lily's bed until sunrise. Sometimes she whispered as if Lily could still hear her. Sometimes she just cried. Emma stopped talking almost completely. She quit drawing, quit laughing, even stopped feeding the horses. Ethan became quieter than ever. He spent hours alone in his room. I assumed we were all grieving differently. None of us knew the nightmare had only just begun. 4 months passed. The investigation reached a dead end. No suspects, no witnesses, no motive. Life didn't move on. It simply stopped. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, Emma never came home from school. People think losing one child is the worst pain imaginable. They're wrong. The worst pain is waking up every morning wondering which member of your family will be next. Emma was 13. She had never missed the school bus. When she didn't come home that Thursday afternoon, I drove the entire bus route twice. I stopped at every house, every intersection, every empty road. Nothing. The bus driver swore she got off at our stop. A neighbor claimed they saw her walking toward our driveway. That was the last confirmed sighting of my daughter. It was as if the earth had swallowed her. Within hours, the FBI joined the investigation. Search teams covered miles of forest. Drones flew over the farmland. Neighbors volunteered day and night. Our home became the center of a massive investigation. But every question led to another dead end. Then something happened that made the detectives believe they were hunting the same person who had taken Lily. One of the investigators entered Emma's bedroom to collect personal belongings. A few seconds later, he called everyone inside. Lying perfectly in the center of Emma's pillow was another wooden bird. This one had been painted black. Nobody knew how it got there. Every night, Sarah left our porch light on. She believed Emma would find her way home. I never had the heart to tell her. I didn't think she was coming back. Then, on the 7th morning, the sheriff knocked on our door. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. I already knew. Sarah screamed so loudly that 2 officers outside rushed into the house. She collapsed before anyone could catch her. I stood there, unable to cry, unable to breathe. It felt like my entire world had gone silent. After Emma's funeral, everything changed. Sarah stopped opening the curtains. She covered every family photograph in the house because she couldn't bear seeing Lily and Emma smiling. Birthdays disappeared. Christmas disappeared. The house became quiet. Too quiet. The only room that still felt alive belonged to Ethan. Sometimes I'd hear him talking to himself late at night, sometimes laughing. When I asked what was so funny, he'd simply shrug. Nothing. I told myself everyone grieved differently. I wanted to believe that. The investigation went nowhere. The media called it the bird murders. Reporters camped outside our property. Psychics claimed they knew where the killer lived. Internet detectives blamed neighbors, teachers, even me. The police questioned everyone, our mailman, our closest friends, even Sarah and I. Months passed, nothing. One afternoon, my parents invited Ethan to spend a few days with them. "We're worried about him," my mother said. "He barely talks anymore." I agreed. Maybe some time away would help. Before leaving, my father hugged me. "You'll get through this," he whispered. Those were the last words he ever said to me. 4 days later, my mother stopped answering her phone. Then my father. At first I assumed they'd gone somewhere, but something felt wrong. When I arrived at their farmhouse, their front door was unlocked. The television was still on. Coffee sat cold on the kitchen table. Everything looked normal, except there was nobody there. Police searched the property for hours. Just before sunset, the sheriff walked toward me. His face said everything. The nightmare had returned. The entire state panicked. Now investigators believed they were hunting a serial killer, someone who had murdered my daughters, and now my parents. The FBI created a behavioral profile. News stations warned families to keep children indoors. Every lead ended the same way. Nothing. Then, a detective named Ryan asked me a question I'd never forget. "Has Ethan ever talked about being adopted?" I stared at him. "What?" Ryan looked surprised. "You never told him?" I felt my stomach drop. We had adopted Ethan when he was 4 years old. He'd been rescued from an abusive home after years of neglect. Sarah and I had promised we'd tell him when he was older. But somehow, the right time never came. Ryan didn't accuse him. He simply nodded. "I think your parents found out he already knew." At first, I refused to believe it. Then Ryan showed me something. A notebook recovered from my parents' house. It belonged to Ethan. At first the pages looked normal. Drawings, school notes, random thoughts. Then, the writing changed. Mom smiles more when Lily hugs her. Emma gets to sit beside Dad every night. Grandma says I'm special, but she doesn't mean it. The final pages became darker. If they disappear, nobody can replace me again. Families can't leave you if there's nobody left to leave with. My hands started shaking. Ryan quietly closed the notebook. "This isn't why he did it," he said, "but it tells us how he was thinking." Then another discovery changed everything. Inside Ethan's bedroom, hidden beneath loose floorboards, police found a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of tiny carved birds, some unfinished, some painted. Exactly like the ones left at every crime scene. Beside them was my father's old carving knife, the same knife he'd given Ethan for his 15th birthday. I couldn't speak. Ryan looked at me. "I'm sorry." The detectives interviewed Ethan one last time. He answered every question calmly, almost politely, until Ryan placed the wooden birds on the table. For the first time, Ethan smiled, not proudly, not happily, just relieved. Ryan asked him one question. "Why?" Ethan stared at the birds for nearly a minute. Then he quietly said, "They always loved them first." Silence filled the room. "They promised nobody would ever leave me again." He looked down. "But they kept forgetting." Ryan asked, "Your grandparents?" Ethan nodded. "They were going to tell you everything." Then he whispered something I'll never forget. "I couldn't lose another family." That sentence destroyed me. Not because it excused what he'd done. It didn't. It was because I finally realized how badly we'd misunderstood the pain he'd been carrying, and how tragically it had twisted into something horrific. The trial lasted months. Doctors testified that Ethan had suffered years of severe abuse before we adopted him, and had shown escalating warning signs that no one fully understood. They were clear about one thing: his childhood trauma did not excuse what he had done. It only explained part of how he had become so deeply disturbed. 8 months later, a little girl disappeared 3 streets away. Police cars filled the neighborhood. Helicopters circled overhead. Sarah stood frozen by the living room window. I walked over to her. Noah was already standing there, watching the flashing lights. Without turning around, he quietly said, "They're searching the woods first." I frowned. "How do you know that?" He stayed silent. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Noah slowly turned toward us. His expression was impossible to read. The screen faded to black. And to this day, I still don't know whether that sentence was an innocent guess or the beginning of another nightmare.